I watched my husband kiss another woman at the airport. My mother was standing right beside me. My name is Priya Anand. I am 31 years old. I work in the audit and compliance division of a mid-sized investment firm in Seattle. And after 6 years in that role, I have learned one thing with absolute certainty. Spreadsheets do not lie to you. People do, and some people do it so effortlessly, with such practiced warmth, that you spend years calling it love before you finally understand what you were actually looking at. I had been married to my husband Daniel for 6 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner when I was 24 and still believed that a man who remembered how you took your coffee was a man who was paying attention. Daniel Mercer sold commercial real estate across the greater Seattle area. He was charming in the specific way that people who move property for a living are charming. Confident handshake, quick smile, the ability to make any room feel like he had already been comfortable in it for years. I mistook that for depth. I mistook his consistency for devotion. And I mistook his financial conversations with me, the ones that grew slowly more pointed over the years, for partnership rather than positioning. We had no children. We had a condo in Capitol Hill that my parents had gifted me outright before the wedding, deeded entirely in my name, and I had never changed that. Not out of distrust, out of a quiet instinct I never paused long enough to examine. The day I found out the truth, I was standing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, waiting for my parents to arrive from Mumbai. They had been visiting my aunt for 3 months, and I had missed them more than I admitted to anyone. I got to the arrivals hall early, found a spot near the barriers with a cup of tea going cold in my hand, and stood there watching the board flip and the crowds move and feeling nothing more unusual than the ordinary tiredness of a Wednesday afternoon. Then I saw him. I recognized Daniel the way you always recognize someone you have shared a bed with for 6 years. The set of his shoulders, the particular tilt of his head when he was relaxed. And then his face, in full, turned at a slight angle, looking down at the woman standing beside him. She was younger than me, maybe 26 or 27, dark hair pulled back, dressed in a long camel coat, a carry-on bag on one shoulder. Daniel reached over and took the bag from her with a gesture so careful and instinctive that I felt it in my chest before I understood it. Then he leaned down and kissed her, not quickly, not like a friend or a cousin or someone you are just being polite to. He kissed her the way you kiss someone when you have completely stopped thinking about whether anyone is watching. They walked toward the exit together, close enough that their arms were touching, moving in the easy rhythm of two people whose bodies had simply learned each other. Daniel passed within 20 feet of where I was standing and did not look up once. I did not move. I did not spill my tea. I stood completely still and watched them disappear through the sliding doors and felt my entire understanding of the last 6 years quietly rearrange itself into something I could not yet name. Then I felt a hand on my back. Warm, steady, familiar. My mother, Sunita, had come through arrivals early. She was standing beside me with her carry-on still rolling behind her, and she had seen everything. I could tell by the way she was looking at me, not with shock, but with the particular expression mothers carry when they have been quietly afraid of something for a long time and have just watched it become real. She did not say anything dramatic. She just pressed her hand more firmly against my back and said softly, "I am here, Beta." My father, Vikram, appeared 30 seconds later, pulling their main luggage, and read the situation in under a second. He had spent 28 years as a senior civil engineer managing government infrastructure contracts across 3 states. He was not a man who panicked. He was a man who assessed. He looked at my face, looked at the doors Daniel had just walked through, and said quietly, "Let us go to the car." We drove back to Capitol Hill in near silence. My father sat in the passenger seat and did not ask me anything unnecessary. My mother held my hand from the back seat the entire way. That evening, Daniel texted me saying he was tied up with clients and would be home late. I read the message, set my phone on the kitchen counter, and went to help my mother unpack while my father sat at the dining table reviewing something on his laptop with the focused calm of a man already working on a problem. The next morning, my father asked me one precise question over chai. Had Daniel ever been added to the deed for the Capitol Hill condo? He had not. My father set his cup down and told me what he had already begun to suspect from the margin of Daniel's financial conversations with me over the years. He told me this did not look like a man having an affair. It looked like a man managing a deteriorating situation and running out of time to fix it. He made 2 calls that afternoon, one to a property attorney he knew in the city, one to a financial consultant named Harish Mehta, an old colleague who had spent 15 years advising on commercial real estate risk. Harish came over the following evening and laid out the picture without embellishment. Daniel's commercial real estate business had been operating on a foundation of deferred debt and selectively disclosed numbers for over 2 years. 3 major deals he had represented as nearly closed were in fact stalled or had quietly fallen apart. A private lending group he had borrowed development capital from had been requesting updated documentation for months and receiving partial responses. His agency license renewal had a compliance flag attached to it that he had been navigating around rather than resolving. And for the past 14 months, he had been making increasingly direct requests to refinance through my condo's equity, to add my name to business loan guarantees, to pull my salary into a joint liability structure. Each time I had said I needed more time, or that I wanted to speak to my own advisor first, or simply that I was not comfortable yet. I had been delaying him out of an instinct I had never trusted enough to name. And every single delay had been exactly right. Harish left. My father told me to do nothing visible, to act normally, to sign absolutely nothing, and to allow the accurate and verifiable information about Daniel's business position to reach the people who had been making decisions without the full picture. No fabrication, no illegal action, just the truth delivered to the right places at the right time. Within 3 weeks, the private lending group requested audited financials and did not receive them. They escalated to formal default proceedings. The compliance flag on his license became a formal review. 2 commercial landlords whose properties he managed pulled their listings following a routine review of active deal history, and the institutional investor he had been pursuing for a fund partnership quietly withdrew after an independent review of his transaction record. Daniel came home one evening looking like a man who had been running at full speed and just hit a wall. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and told me about the bridge loan he needed, the short-term equity release from the condo, the plan that would fix everything in 6 months. His voice had the controlled urgency of someone making their final pitch, and beneath it I could hear very clearly that he already knew it was not going to work. When I said no, the way I had said no every time before, something in him shifted. He told me that I was his wife and that marriage meant standing beside someone when things got hard. He told me he had given 6 years to building something and he deserved my support. Then he asked me in a voice that had gone completely flat, where I kept my mother's jewelry. I sat very still, and I listened to every word. And somewhere in the listening, the last thread of uncertainty I had been holding on to simply released, not painfully, more like setting down something heavy you have been carrying for so long you stop noticing the weight. I texted my father 4 words. "It is time, Papa." Within 24 hours, I was sitting across from a family law attorney named Christine Park, who reviewed every document with quiet efficiency and confirmed in plain language that the Capitol Hill condo was my separate non-marital property under Washington state law, protected from distribution in any divorce proceeding, and that the filing could be initiated within 48 hours. I told her to prepare it. My father flew in the next morning. When I walked through the front door that evening with Vikram beside me, Daniel looked at my father's face and seemed to understand instantly that something had changed in a way he could not negotiate his way through. I told him I had been at SeaTac 6 weeks earlier. I told him I had watched him arrive with a woman named Jess Calloway, who had worked as a staging coordinator for 2 of his residential listings. I told him my mother had been standing beside me and had seen everything. I told him I knew about the default proceedings, the license review, the investor withdrawal, and the lenders who were moving to collect. I told him I had filed for divorce that morning, that the condo was legally mine and would remain entirely mine, and that I was asking him to pack his belongings and leave within the hour. My father sat in the armchair near the window and said nothing at all. He simply sat there with his hands folded and his expression completely still. And somehow that quiet presence was the most grounding thing in the room. Daniel left within the hour. He took 2 bags and his laptop and made one final comment at the door about whether I understood what I was throwing away. I told him I had not thrown anything away. I had simply protected what was already mine, and that those were not the same thing. The door closed, and the apartment went quiet in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. A clean, specific quiet that comes when a space finally belongs only to the person standing in it. The divorce was finalized 4 months later without a trial. The condo was confirmed as separate property. Daniel's business was listed as a liability with no transferable assets. 6 years divided down to a settlement that took less than 1 afternoon to sign. I stood on the courthouse steps afterward in the gray November light with my parents beside me, my mother's hand in mine, and my father's hand on my shoulder, and I tilted my face up toward the sky for just a moment. Not triumphant, not broken, just clear. My life was entirely my own again, and I was going to be so much more deliberate about who I allowed into it.